Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Zinghausen with you. Today is May 21st. There are a lot of interesting news stories. In this episode, several different versions of Putin were spotted in the Kursk region. Last night, drones attacked one of the most important enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex. And in Russia, parents have started to complain that their children are being forced to assemble drones. How Donald Trump lost his temper over accusations of playing into Russia's hands, and how the European Union drove Medvedev into a white-hot rage. I'll also talk about how, under very strange circumstances, the founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, suddenly decided to disrupt the election of a pro-Ukrainian president in Romania. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Let's get into it. It turns out that Putin visited the Kursk region, met with some local Komsomol members who call themselves volunteers. And of course, he also met with Hinstein. Listen, I remembered the Komsomol members for a reason. Why do all these new Russian youth leaders look exactly like crazed Komsomol members from Soviet movies? Like, hello, Vladimir Vladimirovich. That's how they act. It's like some kind of hybrid between the propagandist Zarubin and that Phil from Goodnight Little Ones. The only nuance in these two meetings, both with those little ghoul volunteers and with Hinstein, is that after meeting with the Komsomol members, Putin's cheeks, by some magical means, migrated to a different place. This has been noticed more than once. Let me show you now. Here's Putin, all puffy-cheeked and apparently a bit tipsy at the meeting with the Komsomol members. Pay attention to his cheeks. They're like ripe apples.
I've been wanting to come see you for a while to talk about your work. Thank you for it. And to learn more about how it's organized.
And here is Putin at the meeting with Hinstein.
This is an armed forces deployment of the Ministry of Emergency Situations in Kursk. It's enormous.
I don't get it. Did a whole minibus of them show up or something? Did they bring a busload of these Putins there? So look, last night, as usual, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that all the drones flying over Russia, there were as many as 127 that were shot down. 6 of them were destroyed over the Moscow region. Also in the Tula, Oriol, Ryazan, Kaluga, Vladimir, and other regions. And what did they use to shoot them down this time? This time they shot them down with a semiconductor and microchip enterprise. By the way, an important enterprise. That is, its products are used in communication systems, control systems, electronic warfare, some tank simulators, and also missile systems. In general, this plant supplies products to 19 enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex, including those involved in the production for the Sukhoi company, as well as Iskander and Kinzhal missiles. So this is an excellent output and confirmed achievement. 10 drones reached the area. So in short, this very bulk of semiconductor and microchip plant really took a hit today. And here's the video. Take a look.
There it is, look, over here. But not towards us, please. Easy, 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 easy. Easy, that's enough. There it goes, flying. Those aren't ours. Ours. Wait, there's going to be an explosion, Grandpa.
Look, I think that one's headed for the plant.
That's already like the 8th one.
Just not towards us, please. Those aren't ours. They are ours. Yeah, don't worry. But why not towards you? Yes, every time the Russians never cease to be amazed at how the war suddenly, as if by magic, comes back to where it started. By the way, I recently came across a post from the mother of a Russian student who was complaining that her son was sent to Alabuga. Well, more precisely, he enrolled at this Alabuga Polytechnic, and they're making him assemble drones in shifts there. And not only are they making him assemble drones, but they're also forcing him to do duty shifts. This Alabuga is located in Tatarstan, and on the same grounds there's the Polytechnic, the drone assembly plant, and dormitories for students. Alabuga is a kind of special economic zone situated not far from the town of Yelabuga on the Kama River. So basically, this student's mother says, were actually against the war, and we had no idea they would force them to assemble these drones there. So how does that even happen? What are you doing? And this student of hers, he doesn't want to be expelled from there. He's 17 years old. So it's kind of like, I wasn't fighting, I was just bringing the ammo. And there's a whole thread of comments saying, yes, they're forcing students not only to assemble things, but even to stand night shifts. When there are threats, they're made to turn off their phones and run to some nearby forest. And of course, our compatriots showed up and showed them photos of how the products they're assembling and gluing with their own hands, how this son's products are killing civilians in Ukraine. And the most interesting thing is that they hired some bloggers who are promoting this Alabuga Polytech, attracting young people there from different countries. There are students from various countries studying there. They're promised citizenship and other things. But in reality, everyone is just put to work. Come on, assemble drones. Just so you understand, the TikTok account of this Polytechnic has more than 70,000 videos. Can you imagine how many they had to churn out? It's like how, at Poplavsky, students are forced to film videos saying things like, apply to Alabuga, everything will be awesome there. Basically, showing how cool it is to study there. And I took a look. There are these really young kids, 17-year-olds, and also foreign students. And they're making all sorts of videos. But honestly, if you read the reviews, it feels like it's some kind of student concentration camp. There's constant surveillance everywhere, biometrics. And at night, they come in to check how many people are in the rooms. So what? It's like a miniature version of Russia, the Russia of the future, or maybe even the Russia we already have. And every now and then, you see news like citizens of 9 countries were injured as a result of a drone attack on the Alabuga Polytech dormitory. But you know, nobody really seems to care much about it. There was only one parent who spoke up saying, this isn't what we agreed to. Why are they being made to assemble these things? And, you know, when it comes to parents who are outraged that their kids are being forced to assemble drones, I just want to remind them that no one is actually keeping them there by force. I mean, it's nonsense. Well, just leave it. Apply somewhere else. Leave the country. That's the best solution. Because right now, or maybe in a day, the drone you assemble will just strike Ukraine, killing civilians, entire families. I think you've heard that Russians have modified the Shaheds, and now their warhead isn't 50, but 90 kilograms. That's, you know, enough to demolish an entire floor in a residential building or even more. There you have it, kids, with their own little hands. That's how they assemble it. And this, by the way, is about the claim that there's no choice. Of course there is a choice. There have been several waves of dissenters. Remember, at the very beginning and then a bit later as well, when Putin announced the mobilization, they left for different countries and stayed there, and they're waiting. Well, probably waiting for that Kremlin beast to die. As for the fact that I didn't kill, I just glued drones. Well, I was just assembling them. That's just ridiculous. Not all occupiers have to kill on the front lines, and some simply don't get the chance. There. And the drone that this little son assembled today could take an entire family's life tomorrow. So all accomplices, both those who assemble and those who carry out Putin's orders and other orders down the chain, sooner or later, everyone involved will have to answer for it. And in one of the videos, you know, I noticed that in their corridors, they have a screen with a May 9th screensaver. Well, the same thing. Putin has hung up all over the country. 80 years. They just recently celebrated that victory all across Russia. 80 years. Although, again, they've cut out the first part of the story. They don't talk about World War II. They only talk about the Great Patriotic War. They were probably remembering their grandfathers there, the ones who would be turning over in their graves. So during World War II, there were also Germans who didn't shoot anyone themselves. They just assembled gas chambers. Some of them even assembled mobile ones. That's how it is, my little killers from Alabuga. So Donald Trump, in response to Vladimir Zelensky's demands, lost his temper and replied sharply, I'll tell you how in a moment. In the meantime, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And if you're already subscribed, make sure to hit the bell icon. So, Donald Trump, in response to Vladimir Zelensky's demands, who, I remind you, was calling for sanctions against Russia, stated that only he himself could make that decision. That is, the President of the United States. It will be my decision, nothing else. We'll see what Russia does, how it behaves, Trump told reporters. We'll see how Russia behaves. How long are we going to keep watching? And Trump emphasized that a critical moment has come in resolving the war. Is this the 20th time now that a critical moment has come? And I deliberately put this news after the story from Alabuga. That is, Donald Trump has repeatedly said that this is a senseless war. Let's put an end to it. He even called it a bloodbath. The war must end because, according to his calculations, 5,000 people die every day in total from both sides. And once he even said that it's young, beautiful people dying, people like his son, like his children, he said that. But can Donald Trump do something to make this war end faster so that there are fewer days, though, when 5,000 people die each day? Well, on the other side, I don't feel sorry for them. They deserve it. They came to someone else's land. But so that fewer Ukrainians die. Can he do that? Of course. Moreover, he just said in the news that only he can make decisions about sanctions. So here we're not even talking about supplying any kind of weapons. Notice we're talking about sanctions here, as Marco Rubio recently pointed out, and Donald Trump himself as well. The Russian economy is facing major problems, and the US can impose, I quote, devastating sanctions. War is first and foremost about money. Well, everyone knows that. Without money, you can't fight. You can't buy weapons or ammunition. You can't supply your army. You have no fuel, nothing. Without war, there's no money. That's it. Or more precisely, without money, there's no war. That's it, period. So, Donald Trump, with his devastating sanctions, you see, I'm following the chain here, no? Devastating sanctions, the economy collapses if we impose them. Here, he can right now deprive Putin of the money for this war, take away the murder weapons from the maniac. He can do this right now. And now the main question, why am I saying all this? If you see crimes being committed, the lives of thousands of innocent people, children and the elderly being taken, and you can stop it, but you don't. Let's see what Russia will do next. So who does that make you? Instead of smacking this moth-like Baldy in the face, you suggest trading with him and bringing him back into the fold of global markets. So he'll have even more money for new wars. You see, we're living in an extraordinary time. And by the way, in the European Union, they're starting to realize that the phrase, "we'll make a great deal," which already makes all of us here feel sick, will most likely be used, in what context? We'll make a great deal with the devil. That's the only context in which it will be used. It was not for nothing that I cited yesterday's report from Western intelligence agencies stating that Putin, having failed, let's be honest, in Ukraine, will want revenge. He will desperately need it. And he definitely does not intend to fade into the brown sunset with the disgraceful war in Ukraine as his final note. He will really need a small victorious war. Western intelligence agencies mention only a few options, Poland or the Baltic states. But he will definitely go to war if he isn't stopped now, or if Russia isn't deprived of its military potential, he will absolutely go to war. That's why truly tough, destructive sanctions are not being imposed. And yes, Europe has recently sped up with sanction packages. A huge thank you to those who are helping Ukraine. There are some who are truly very pro-Ukrainian, but even if it means hurting themselves, they should impose sanctions to shake up and overheat the Russian economy so much that the bolts start flying off. And this colossus would collapse. The whole cauldron would just explode. This is what needs to be done. Because by not imposing these tough sanctions, Europe is bringing the war closer to its own home with its own hands. And special attention, special musical moose awards should be given to those who help Putin circumvent the sanctions. Just unleash the fury of your secondary sanctions on them. Destroy them. Take just one as an example. And then the rest will think twice. Well, that's that. Now, here's some news that will really make Dmitry Medvedev rise from his Hawthorne-induced hibernation, grab a knife and, run around after his family like Chucky the doll, a little guy with a knife throwing a tantrum. A new package of sanctions has come in. It's not devastating, but there is. First of all, one piece of news that's important to me personally, because the sanctions have been imposed on, Kamaz, research, universities, research universities, management, shareholders of defense industry enterprises. It's all there, but also against the director of Chersonesus Taurika. I was born in Sevastopol, born in Crimea. What the Russians have done to Chersonesus, this new construction they slapped on there, it's just insane. How do they even manage that? Seriously, how? Explain to me how they can touch something with their little hands and, turn it into a pile of crap, no matter what was there before. How do they do that? What kind of amazing skill is that they have? Of course, amazing in quotation marks. They struck at drone manufacturers, and several companies were hit at once. And what's important, the reason I said to unleash fury on those who help circumvent sanctions. 7 Chinese companies, 2 from the United Arab Emirates, and 1 each from Belarus and Turkey. Of course, everyone knows perfectly well who is helping Putin circumvent the sanctions, who is delivering the necessary parts to him, bypassing the restrictions, but for now, they pretend not to see everyone and have imposed sanctions against 189 tankers. This is an important decision. Soon, there will be little left of the shadow fleet. But European sanctions are good and American sanctions are excellent. And Donald Trump says, well, let's see now. What will Russia do there? So what? And what is it doing now? What is Putin doing right now? Well, now, friends, let's talk about the most effective sanctions, about our warriors and about the armed forces of Ukraine. You know that we have an important fundraiser for the unmanned aerial vehicle unit. This is the 252nd Separate Battalion. The soldiers need a pickup truck so they can quickly get to where they need to be, launch what needs to be launched, and disappear just as quickly. And the pickup needs a good wrap so they can return safe and sound. So this is for the wheels, and the wrap for our warriors. Right now, from the very beginning, they have been on that front since the Annika operation. They're really awesome. We need to help, and we have just a little bit left to go. The link to donate is in the description of this video and in the comments. That's if you're watching on my channel, but for those from Ukraine or abroad. But if you're not on my channel, here's a QR code. It takes you directly to the donation page. Let's help our warriors. And now, friends, a little bit about the Kiev regime of Satanists, Anglo-Saxons, Nazis, Russophobes, Acro-Saxons, and basically about us. It so happened that in my observation, the everyday Nazis and chauvinists among all the former Soviet republics, this is just my observation, you can agree or not, by the way, feel free to share your opinion in the comments. For some reason, the most zealous everyday chauvinists are Russians. They show themselves the most in this regard, for obvious reasons, because they have this sense of great grandeur, the status of being the titular nation. Everything about them is great. The great Russian language, great culture, a great country, a great heritage, and so on. Why? Where does it come from? Who are you really? It's not a great country. It's just a big country you have. That's all there is to it. And even then, I think China will soon challenge that fact. But that's not the point. My generation, Dovisham, and we're from the Paleozoic era, still caught all those jokes about Jews, about Chukchi, about Ukrainians, about whom else, dumb Germans and Americans who, for some reason, are always flying on a plane with a clever and resourceful Russian. and jokes about Native Americans. Basically, everyone was somehow not quite right, and only the Russian was the hero. In the Soviet Union, people would just crack up at that kind of humor. Modern Russia has continued this tradition. Remember, not so long ago, those movies Brother and Brother 2. What else was there? Well, how was it? We all know very well how people from the North Caucasus were called and treated. Now, Kadyrov has become a real hero. But back then, remember how it was in the movies. It was completely different. And remember all those crappy Nasha Russia sketches. How are the people of Tajikistan? KVN is just a cesspool of stereotypical jokes about different nationalities. And that hasn't gone anywhere. It's just that now Putin needs to tell these fairy tales about a big multinational family so he can draft people for the war from all regions and even from other countries. And right now, you're seeing a classic example of all of this in action. We, the great Russians, and all of you over there are somehow strange, colorful, crooked, and so on. The head of the investigative committee, Bastrikin, recently spoke about the problem of migrants. And look at what he said. 20,000 people who recently received Russian citizenship, they are on the front lines at war in Ukraine. But he puts it in his own way, calling it the so-called special military operation. Anyway, he says 20,000 who recently received Russian citizenship. Attention. We have already caught 80,000 of these kinds of Russian citizens who not only aren't on the front lines, they don't even want to go to the military enlistment office. They have been registered for military service, and already 20,000 of these young Russian citizens who, for some reason, don't like living in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, or Kyrgyzstan, are now on the front lines. And I'm quoting here. He spoke about the migrant issue on May 20th. So, in his opinion, employers should sign contracts with migrants for no more than a year, and this is important now in Russia. There should be, I quote, no wives, husbands, grandmothers, grandfathers, or children of these new Russian citizens. So that's the whole attitude right there. Not only that, just think about it. No, citizens of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, 25% out of 80,000. That's 20,000 have already been sent there to die. Do you even think at all when you go there to Russia? And why? Not to me. I'm not going to give you advice. That's not my business. You choose your own path in life, and so on. But that's the kind of attitude there is. And these were once so-called brotherly republics, and now they're just neighbors. The attitude is like, there's some kind of second class. So you want our passport, do you? Off you go, straight to Putin's trenches. Well, now let's move on to Pavel Durov. I found it extremely, not more just that I didn't like it. It's just a very strange story that happened to him. He made a statement and almost disrupted, or maybe even already did disrupt, the elections in Romania, where a pro-Ukrainian candidate won. And let me remind you, the pro-Russian candidate, George Simeon, lost. So Durov stated that he is ready to testify in Romania regarding the issue of foreign interference in the presidential elections. And that's how he commented on the words of this losing ultra-right pro-Russian, but George Simeon, who claimed that France and Moldova might have interfered in the elections. So, Durov brought this up. He said it right during the elections in Romania. He said that supposedly the French foreign intelligence met with him and wanted to get information about Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania under the pretext of fighting terrorism. Well, he said that I didn't tell them anything. Isn't that like the boy Bolshevik? Yes, I didn't tell them anything. But look at what he's doing. He makes this statement when it becomes clear right at the finish line that the pro-Ukrainian candidate is winning. He says, but they asked me. And after that, what the leader of the Romanian far-right, Simeon, who had already agreed and already admitted his defeat. He says, now I'm going to challenge the results of this election and let Durov come here and testify as a witness. What do you think about that? Moreover, another interesting fact is that this supposed approach to him by the head of French intelligence happened much, much earlier. So Durov waited for the moment when it became clear that deep the pro-Russian candidate was losing and says, well, this is what happened to me. I can even tell you about it. What do you think about such a coincidence? Now, it really feels like some heavy artillery is being brought in, right? A lot of questions come up here. Even though Durov has a nice story about fleeing Russia, you still can't hide the fact that at the request of Roskomnadzor, Telegram instantly blocks hundreds of Telegram channels. And until recently, when Ukraine was trying to get rid of Russian propaganda on Telegram, there was just zero attention to it until they threatened to block it here. Well, then they finally started to act. So, and you know, as they say, to use the language of young people. Well, if you know that TikTok meme, you know what I mean. And what about the fact that Durov's father, mother, and his brother, who is considered a mathematical genius and is credited with creating the technical part of Telegram, all live in Russia, in St. Petersburg, exactly where they don't say, but they all live there. What a curious coincidence, right? How convenient that Durov just happened to drop this information at the perfect time. By the way, friends, speaking of perfect timing and being attentive, here's a quick test for attentiveness. Most likely half of you are watching me right now, not on my own channel. Many channels upload my videos to their own pages. Mine is called Boris Tizengausen. The channel name is right here in the corner. If it doesn't say Boris Tizengausen but something else, well, then you're watching on a different channel. So I recommend you subscribe to the original channel. It's super easy to do. It only takes a few seconds. Just type Boris Tizengausen into the YouTube search. My channel will pop up and you'll see the subscribe button. That's it. Click subscribe and we're connected. But honestly, with these social network and messenger owners, you always see some Russian influence lurking behind them. Well, Durov, for example, was born in Russia, and somehow they even managed to take V-Contact away from him in a strange way. And what about Elon Musk? I think that sooner or later we'll find out who put that post into his head. And in general, this whole idea about Khrushchev's mistake and all the other pro-Russian nonsense. By the way, we haven't heard much from him lately. Or rather, there's been little news about him. Apparently, he's being gradually removed from his affairs, or maybe not so gradually. In any case, by the way, even back when he made that gesture at the inauguration, I said he wouldn't last long with Donald Trump. Two daffodils in one bed do not bloom. And psychopathic too, by the way. So at best, he'll quietly leave to try to rebuild his faltering empire. And maybe that's actually better for him. You know, maybe it really is for the best. He doesn't need to be in politics. Politics would definitely have destroyed him. He would have become a kind of Berezovsky to Putin. I mean, he would have been an analog of Berezovsky for Putin. I think Donald Trump will still tell him, or maybe he has already told him, be grateful you're not in jail. And as for you, friends, take care of yourselves, Kunwo, take care of your loved ones, and if possible, support the fundraiser. Check whether you're on the official channel or not. Wishing us all a peaceful day, and of course, glory to Ukraine.